Hi everyone, I hope you're doing well. I wanted to send you out some information regarding Chapter 5 in case some of you wanted to work on your capstone over the break between 6:34 and 6:35. I hope this presentation will be helpful to you, and as always, let me know if you have any questions about your Chapter 5 or any questions regarding your capstone in general. So just a reminder as to where we have been in terms of your capstone and where it's going. This graphic really does encapsulate what action research is designed to be. So again, way back in your program of study, you worked on planning your study out. In your beginning classes, you probably went through several ideas and iterations of what you wanted your capstone to be and what you wanted it not to be. From there, you wrote chapters 1, 2, and 3 and went through the wonderful IRB process, started collecting your data, and then this semester we worked on the analysis of the data and the crafting of your Chapter 4. And that leaves one very important piece of your capstone left, and that is what your Chapter 5 is going to become. And really the entire reasoning behind a Chapter 5 is so you can answer one very simple question about your capstone, and that is, so what? You have done all the work in terms of planning, you have collected all of this data, you have analyzed all of this data. Looking back now in the rearview mirror, back to the beginning of your capstone process, so what? What have you learned? What are you going to take away, and what can others take away by reading and internalizing what your capstone is all about? So again, in 635 next semester, we're really going to focus in on this very important question of so what. One of the biggest issues we have at Gardner-Webb with candidates working on their Chapter 5 is many candidates want Chapter 5 to just simply become a repeat of Chapter 4. So keep in mind as you are crafting your Chapter 5 that you have already stated the data in Chapter 4. Once you get into Chapter 5, again, the focus should shift and not just simply be a repeat of the data that's already been established in your capstone, but really taking your thought process to a deeper level, educating your reader on a deeper level as to what conclusions have been made based upon the data. And again, coming back to that question of so what, making sure that your reader and you as the researcher understand the full implications that your capstone had on your practice as a classroom teacher. Of course, with any capstone chapter, they are built to be standalone chapters. So your Chapter 5 will start out with a very basic overview, just like your chapters 1, 2, 3, and 4 have started out. Once you have crafted your overview, the next section in your Chapter 5 should be the conclusions from results section. And this is a very important section because this is where you start to answer the question of, so what? So first of all, you want to make sure that any conclusion that you have, that it's not just a whim that you're going from because you're thinking that this is what your data have already told you, but you really need to go back to Chapter 4, look at the results, make sure you fully internalize them, and then connect them to certain conclusions you can make from your study. So in this section, it's okay to briefly remind the reader about the specific results that you're referring to, but once you have done that, move on and talk about the conclusions. Again, what have your data told you? What were the surprises? What are the implications for your students and your classroom and your school? So basically, this section is going to become the big ideas, the big takeaways from your study. From your conclusions, you need to think about some recommendations you can make. Again, going back to that beginning graphic that we discussed, action research is all about learning why something works or why something doesn't work, and then moving forward in a better fashion. So remember, your action research project is built to help you with all of the North Carolina professional teaching standards. Well, as we all are aware of at this point, Standard 1 is all about leadership. So thinking about some great recommendations you can make for your own instructional practices, for your classroom, to share with your grade level, to share with your school, this is where you're going to start that thought process. But again, remember when you're in Chapter 5, you want to link your recommendations to results from other components of your capstone. So again, it's okay to briefly remind the reader about the specific data that you are using to make a recommendation, but once you have completed that brief reminder, move on and don't let this just become a repeat of Chapter 4. It's also great in this particular section if you can link your results to Chapter 4, but again, if you can go back to Chapter 2 and find a study that maybe tracked a similar path that your capstone tracked, and if another study in Chapter 2 recommended that a certain change could be made, and then your data supports that, it's also great if you can go back into Chapter 2 and say, I have this recommendation not only because my data discovered this or didn't discover this, but also another study that I used in my lit review also said the exact same recommendation. That gives some validity to your recommendations. And if your capstone is talking about anything that may be controversial in your school, or maybe it's a change that certain stakeholders at your school are not wanting to support, that takes the heat off of you somewhat because you have your data in Chapter 4, but again, you have another study in Chapter 2 that also says that a certain recommendation would be great for student learning. From this section, or from the recommendation section, you're going to move into implications for future research. And when crafting this section, it's important to think all the way back to the beginning of your capstone process. And basically, if you could start the process over again, what changes would you make? And that's one component of this section. And then the other component is if another researcher were to pick up your capstone at its current state and take it to the next step, what would you want that researcher to know and understand and do with your capstone? And in what direction should they take your capstone in order to take it to the next level? Once these sections have been completed, you will end with a summary that, again, just one paragraph is fine here that basically educates the reader. If they were to pick up your Chapter 5 and read your summary, what would they need to know about your capstone in terms of Chapter 5? Basically, you're going to summarize your Chapter 5 in one paragraph. And once these sections have been completed, that will conclude your Chapter 5. Of course, we will work on this a lot in 635 and continue the feedback process that we've established. And again, I look forward to reading your work and hope that you can have a smooth ending to this capstone process. Thank you so much.